Okay, I will start in Finnish, so bear with us, we will change to English soon. Tervetuloa kaikki tänne Marian 01 Urban 3 tähän meidän tilaisuuteen, joka on leivottu tämän Geofoorumin vuosikokouksen ympärille. Meillä on täällä mielenkiintoinen alustus, jonka ensin kuulemme, ja sitten voimme yllättää meidän kansainvälisen puhujan tekemällä kysymyksiä siitä alustuksesta. Sehän nyt ei ole kovin suomalainen tapa. Sieltä linjoiltakin varmasti sitten voidaan koittaa ottaa kommentteja ja kysymyksiä mukaan, jos sieltä tulee. So let's move on our schedule today. We have an interesting speech by Mr. Damon Hernandez. He comes from mixed reality and will be explaining more. We had quite an interesting discussion about a week ago about geospatial. And since I have been absolutely too long in this geospatial arena, it really went to my heart because Damon started to explain how important geospatial is in the future. So I'm really expecting that he will give a good reasoning for our existence. And no, you will not. Okay, let's see. So let's turn the floor to Damon and listen to his presentation. And he is expecting a lot of questions afterwards. Go ahead. Thanks.
Thank you so much. All right. Thank you, of course, for having me. It is an honor to be able to keynote the Geoforum event because, as he said, I am a fan of geospatial, and I'll get into that, sciences and whatnot. So I was kind of asked originally to talk about how geospatial connects with, well, really everything. Which I found kind of shocking because as a fan of your industry and as your profession, I kind of figured that y'all were everywhere because you are everything. So what I'm going to look to do today is not cover the obvious for your profession, but to kind of let you know why I'm passionate about it, and then how people like myself and in other industries are utilizing the great work that you're doing. So moving on, a little bit about myself and why I'm up here. So I am originally from Texas, so I will refer to people as sir, ma'am, and y'all. It's a sign of respect, not of age, so just beware. I have background as a tech designer and developer, although also an entrepreneur and others. Now, I have been active in the interactive 3D space now for 23 years, and mainly for enterprise. So I'm very familiar with the open standards and also immersive technologies for about 2003. So some of what I'll get into is coming from, again, that passion and that focus. I have been involved with the built environment sector, though, since 2007 when I went out to San Francisco. And I've been active here because of people like Teemu Lehtinen and an event that we have in the Finnish building industry since 2015. I am proud to say that in 2020, I was selected to be a 90-day Finn, which is a program that's by Helsinki Partners. So that was a really awesome opportunity for me to be able to really see what Finland is about. I loved it so much that I'm extending this to the 90-year Finn program. I recently got my permanent visa, so I'm very excited to be here and see how I can contribute back to the local ecosystem. And my day job is really about giving tech superpowers to people out in the field and then people in various different sectors of the built environment. And I include that as geospatial, right? And then as I'll share in my volunteer time, I'm a big fan of community building, mainly through tech, and then also hackathons as well. So just so I may be able to get to know the audience, at least here in the room. So how many of you would identify yourselves as very techy? Okay, all right, I appreciate the honesty. How many people are familiar with these devices that I placed up here in the front of the room? How many of you have had a virtual reality or augmented reality headset on your head? Okay, wow, all right, super. Great. So a rather technical audience that I'm sure this will all be kind of a little bit boring and whatnot. So last year, I was fortunate enough to participate in an event that goes on called WDBE. How many of you participated in this event, are familiar with it? Okay, super. All right. And there I explained to me how tech is like cooking. And I think what's neat about it is that you have to take time to identify the ingredients that you're working with. Working with ingredients takes time, right? You have to accept error. You have to understand the value of of these ingredients. You have to really understand how does it work alone, which ones really complement each other, and then which ones are more challenging to mix, right? And so this is where I, said at that event, and I kind of try to advocate to people, go out and be chefs, right? Really look at technology integration and adoption as cooking. And then moving on to this event, I wanted to start with again why I'm inspired and why I'm excited about what you do. Now, I don't know if you have a lot of people who come up and say, hey, we're fans of your work, but definitely I am among that. And the reason why is, reality is your business, right? I mean, everything. That's what's so cool is, from, bathymetry data to terrain data, the birds and the bees, all the ways to cities, right? Reality is what you do. It is what you capture. And so for me, as someone who is a fan, and my profession is mixing of these environments. So what I will get playing here is just an example of how in the past I've looked at integrating this type of data. So on the left, what you'll see is a web-based, all built on ISO standards, base globe, where I took geolocated data and was able to put this on a tiling globe that was actually part of an interactive solar system. And this was in 2010, leveraging X3D, which is the ISO standard for Web 3D, and some of these other frameworks. And grabbing everything from CAD data to some other type of just basic 3D geometry. And then, as you can see here, this is a tiling globe that is a part of the X3D Earth initiative at the time. And then what was cool about this is you could actually zoom to the other planets, click on them, and get interaction. So the idea on the left was from this space to face. And then what you're seeing on the right was more of the day job. So this is where I was a co-founder of a company that does timber fabrication, and I was the tech person there. And so for us, geospatial was very important because we had to go out and get all of the data about the area when we were looking to build these homes. And so what we had on the right was Esri. We were a part of their incubator program for their startups. They invited us to their conference down in San Diego, where we were able to show off where we had taken a configurator that we had built for the web and then brought this into VR. And so what you're actually seeing is in the background where we took a variety of different building footprints. So these are actually real buildings from a variety of different cities that we kind of were showing how you could bring in this building data. We generated this make-believe city, and then we showed this configurator where someone could go in, pull from this library of digitally fabricatable ready components, and then put them together. And then as you'll see, when the thing tilts up, you'll see kind of a total cost calculator above that shows. So as the builder was able to go in and snap together the shell of the home and what we delivered, we were able to give them this, again, in kind of this context of not necessarily in this case the real world, but again, showing how you could take all the way from design data, the land, the digital, the DEMs, all the way to fabrication level information, all within one scene graph. And this found now 10 years ago. And then that data, again, even though it looked very basic, was coming from fabrication data. That would then go to these machines in a factory in Portland, Oregon, where then we would fabricate those components, put them on a truck, they would go out and then be assembled. So it really was, and always is exciting for me, is how do you take real world, and that goes into the digital twin of itself, and then how can we connect that to the machines and the technologies to bring that back into the real world. And so moving next, I kind of want to define what is mixed reality. There's a lot of interest in this. I'm sure a lot of y'all have heard the word metaverse the past few years and things like that. But this is kind of a definition that I've gone with for quite some time. As you can see, this was Paul Milgram from 1994, who kind of defined mixed reality as this spectrum that goes all the way from reality to virtual reality. And then around 2015, 2016, Microsoft, to be quite honest, came in, kind of hijacked it for their HoloLens, modified the definition of mixed reality a little bit to kind of tailor what they were doing. But this really is a blanket term used to describe any experience between reality and virtual reality. And that's kind of what I'm going to cover a little bit here. So I think the most obvious thing is that we already live in a mixed reality. Who in here does not have a cell phone on them? Okay, exactly. You live in a mixed reality. If you're looking up who I am, you're in a digital reality. The gentleman who's on his phone right now, he's in a different reality, right? So we're mixing our realities already. It's just how are we actually upping the levels of immersion? And we see this all the way from things like virtual tours and virtual reality, mobile devices, and then of course, in augmented reality, we're seeing more and more of this being used on the job site. And what's interesting is that enterprise has been pushing these technologies for quite some time, right? These technologies, I'm sure, as most of you know, are nothing very new. There's a conference called Construct VR, which actually is in its 23rd year, which the whole point of this conference is construction or virtual reality applications for the construction industry, right? So when you hear people say like, oh, there's all these cool possible use cases, well, actually, they've been here for a while. And what's exciting for me, especially here in Finland, is that, you know, you have people like VTT and others who've actually been using these technologies for the built environment sector for quite some time, right? And so that's what's really neat, is to see where some of these things where people think are kind of a little bit more futuristic actually are here and being implemented. It's just not a lot of people go and share, hey, I used a hammer today. It's just a tool. There's no reason to be excited about it. But moving on, so then we look at you know, some neat things, like, so going one step further, here we have a company that actually came out of one of these hackathon events I'll share with a little bit, that looked at how can we take a variety of different geospatial data that people use and turn this into a way of workforce training. Okay, this is a big issue, I'm sure, here in Finland as well, but in the States and kind of globally, there is a big issue with skills training and having enough people who know how to do the specific task. And so what this company, Spatial Think, does is that they take a reality capture scan of an environment, any of the actual lat long data that's available that the people want to put into their training modules, and they allow, and they've made a very basic tool where anyone can go in and kind of drag and drop and build these simulations, where normally what people have to do if they want this kind of educational thing, they need to go out and hire a company that would develop that specific thing. And then they'd have to go back to this company where they decided, hey, what if we made a tool that was kind of like WordPress, where we let the trainers build these training modules? And so what you see here is where, again, they started off with a plumbers and pipe fitters union in the US. This is one of the larger unions in the US and Canada. And they found great traction where then the trainers, these people who are normally plumbers and pipe fitters, are able to go in and build these interactive experiences for training essentially people who are digital natives. And that's something that I humbly submit that you know, we also need to consider. I am in my late 40s, but there is a whole new generation of people that are coming in, and we have to educate them in their native language. So these tools are kind of a no-brainer, and I'm very happy to see that Spatial Think is kind of tackling this. And then moving on, you know, this idea of mixed reality cities. So I am a fan of XD Twin, which has some demos that are here. This is a Finnish-based company, and I highly recommend take a look at how they're leveraging you know, different city data and whatnot for visualization and helping out with this concept of digital twins. And then also, I'm excited to be here because I'm a big fan of putting the 3D world part in World Wide Web. And for quite some time, I've been promoting and working with different municipalities and things like that on how can they structure their data using open standards from a variety of different industries, right? To bring it into a visualization layer that is web-based, because normally you don't want people that are having to access and do their job to have to download an app and things like this. And so how can you now, with the advancements in the web, it is possible to have these highly interactive 3D game-like environments that run in the browser, but then also have browser-based augmented reality and have browser-based virtual reality. Because for me, I see these things as they're really good features. But if someone says, hey, you have to put on a headset to do your job, I think that is very limiting. So it's very cool to see that for those that need to have their data in a way that they have control over it, right? You're not putting your data into someone else's platform. You're retaining the rights to your own data. That there are standards in place that support this. And another one of the things that was exciting with the 90-day FIN program is because there's a few places that I look at as kind of the poster children for how to do your city data right. Singapore and Finland are among the top two that I see. So when I came here, it was super exciting to be like able to play in a place where you have city GML model, you have really good, I mean, you'll have a variety of different open data that's available as well. And so for someone who likes to digitize reality, this is kind of like Willy Wonka's factory. And I'm Charlie with the golden ticket. And so much supporting this that I am still an advocate, and with a new company that I decided to start here last year, we're actually open sourcing. So with our base platform to show how all these standards can work and types of new user interfaces and user experience design that I worked on when I was at Samsung Research, we want to open source this just to show what can be done. So as cities and other people that really do need more control over their data, or municipalities, they have options to look at as opposed to more proprietary solutions, right? So you can get the same kind of metaverse or mixed reality type experience, but all built on web technologies. And then we've been fortunate enough to actually finish our first project, which was for the Building Information Foundation with the funded project by Citra. So that was very exciting to kind of show how we could start to put some of this stuff into practice. And then, of course, going forward, there's a variety of other different potential applications. I mean, when they said, how could geospatial data be used? I mean, that's thousands of slides, right? But I thought I'd hit some of the ones that, one, because of the gaming industry here, right? This is very important. And in a project I was able to participate on some years ago, what I thought was very neat actually was leveraging real world data and real-time real world data to influence the game, right? So just like you have a flight simulator here of Microsoft that uses a lot of real world data, the idea here being that if it's raining in Brazil, it would be raining in the game. If it's daytime in that country, it would be daytime, in the game. And if a flock of birds, so all of the data that's being collected about the real world, how can we integrate that into these environments? Because if there is a mission or some kind of game where I'm playing and it's raining in the real world there and it's raining in the game, that's neat, right? And so how can we connect this idea of taking the real world and adding a gaming element to it? And last I checked, Finland's kind of known for its gaming industry, right? You're definitely super at selling that. So and then also something that was very interesting for me, that on the right, the graphic looks rather game-like, but to see the impact that this has actually had with some of the people that I've been able to work with over the years is going back to that human element. So we have entertainment on one side, but then we have mental wellness. So the way that the geospatial data can be used for doing therapy and traumatic recreations is much bigger than I thought, right? There's lots of examples of where, of course, these types of recreations of a real environment are used to treat troops with PTSD. But then I also found where therapists were finding ways of being able to take people into places where they had a traumatic experience just somewhere on the globe, a car wreck, some kind of personal trauma, take them back there, and through desensitization therapy, right, be able to use this recreation of the built environment, things like birds, shadows, that time of year, everything, plug that data in to really make these engaging environments to help these people overcome personal trauma. And so for me, that was super exciting, right? Because that was where I have met therapists who said, how can we use mixed reality in the digital world and all of the data that's being collected to help people, get past very difficult times in their life? So as recently, and as I mentioned, this mixed reality future that we're kind of going toward has a name, right? And we've heard of this term metaverse, and I just wanted to dive in a little bit into this. So as you can see here in the definition, for those maybe online that maybe can't see it, the idea of the metaverse, according to Neil Stevenson, who was the person who came up with the book Snow Crash, he was the author, was this idea of a single virtual world that was a connected virtual worlds and different experiences all into one. And similarly, this is the internet, right? The internet and the web is made up of intranets, websites, and all of these kind of things. And what's very interesting is that if the metaverse is a network of 3D virtual worlds, quite honestly, it doesn't exist yet, right? And so when you hear people talk about, oh, our metaverse, what they're really talking about is their virtual world, right? Their intranet or their website, okay? And I say this because Neil Stevenson, the guy who came up with the word, says that the metaverse does not exist yet, right? So right now you hear a lot of this word from a hype perspective, which is exciting. It's definitely brought a lot to this. But again, this is something that we are several years away from, right? And also the idea of thinking that the interaction with this world will be through expensive devices is also very privileged, okay? Most of the world is going to interact with the metaverse for decades on this and nothing more. So looking at mixed reality, that's where we have to think of how can we reach that person who just has this, all the way to the person who wants to go fully into understanding the geospatial data in context. And so I've often kind of joked, coming from the States, of course, I kind of look at it a little bit like this, is that there was this huge world over here of things that people have been working on for quite some time. And then the past few years, the media kind of hit this small little area, came back and said, hey, the whole metaverse is crypto, NFTs, and blockchain. And that is a part of it. And what's interesting is that those of us who have worked in that didn't know that existed either. So it is new. It's new for everyone, but there's a lot more to it than that. And I feel this way because I've been YouTubing as Metaverse One since 2007. I've been blogging about it since 2008 using this specific moniker. I've been fortunate enough to present everywhere from Stanford back in 2008, SIGGRAPH, and some of these other events, specifically talking about how GIS data, how digital fabrication data, all of these things come together to make an open metaverse, not something controlled by any one company. Now, of course, we see that with the internet now, right? There are these big players who kind of dominate certain social networks and whatnot, but they are not the web. They are not the internet. And such is the case with this here. And so I will be the first person to be this controversial, is to say that anyone who calls themselves an expert, I have my opinions about that, right? It's hard to be an expert in something that doesn't exist yet. And there's places that you can go with that attitude. I love the enthusiasm. The enthusiasm is great, but let's be real, okay? It takes decades to become an expert in something. And if it doesn't exist yet, I have a hard time swallowing this. So in 2008, there was a group that got together called the Open Metaverse Roadmap. And what was neat is a lot of the people that are in the graphic space actually were inspired by Snow Crash. I'll be honest, I was studying law, read that book, and it changed my career in '99. I went into this. So that book was that impactful on me on this idea of metaverse. And then what was neat to see this group is that they came and they expanded upon that version, right? They took what was inspired by Neil Stevenson and then they said, how can we expand this? And they took it into augmented reality, right? You can kind of see where it's external, intimate, simulation, augmentation. On the real world side, they had augmented reality and mirrored worlds. And then on the other side, they had life logging, which now we refer to as social media, and virtual worlds. And this was the part that I really kind of gravitated toward. looks like the formatting because of Mac kind of pushed the graphic off the screen. But on the right side of the screen, it shows where they really outline this idea of how you're using geospatial data to, have simulated Earths. This was around the time of Keyhole, Google Earth, some of these that were coming on, NASA's Whirlwind, if you're familiar, and a variety of these different ways of doing geovisualization. And here we go. And then it was kind of followed up recently. So a gentleman that I was fortunate enough to actually work with, who brought me out to San Francisco, Tony Parisi, who is one of two people who developed 3D on the web. So if you use 3D on the web, spinning a sneaker, looking at geodata, a lot of the startups that you see, this was the guy who wrote that language initially. It was called VRML back in the day. And that became an ISO standard in 1997. And so a few years back, he said, well, let's kind of define these 7 rules of the metaverse of what it is. And given the fact of what he's actually done for the industry, I would highly encourage anyone take a look at his Medium post here to kind of get a good view of how these people who truly are the pioneers, right? They have as much gray in their hair as some of the folks in the audience, how they define it. And right now he is the chief strategy officer at Lemon One, which is the company that was co-founded by the gentleman who created the book Snow Crash, right? And the term metaverse. And then what was exciting is then, you saw Zuckerberg, who came out with the whole shift of his company. And then we saw these really neat experiences in their keynote a few years back, where they were talking about, the Meta's metaverse and this idea of this mixed reality, where all of this has to do with geospatial. This does not happen. You have to know where that person is in the real world. You have to know the data that's around. You have to know object recognition, right? You have to have a lat launch. This is Pokemon Go on steroids, right? And so the geospatial community, y'all are the building blocks, whether you want to be or not. Everything that you document, everything that you do is becoming this foundation layer. It's the stage where the performers, where the applications, where everything else is going to exist. It already is. And so what I humbly submit is please get more engaged. And this is coming in, all of these clips across the top are from that Zuckerberg keynote, right? So this lets you know that big companies and all that hype that you hear cannot exist, in my humble opinion, without your industry, period. And so in that, I'm a firm believer that the spatial web is here. There's a lot of really interesting work that's going on in the OGC, I feel, that kind of supports this. And now it's just getting more immersive with some of the recent advancements in the technology. So kind of going through this from a standards perspective is, that data for the city itself is being generated in a few different ways. Of course, I'm sure there are folks in here that are familiar with, or maybe not. IFC is Industry Foundation Class. This is essentially kind of like the HTML, if you will, for 3D building data. USD is a format that came out of Pixar that essentially is looking to kind of be a standardized language for a scene description. And then GLTF is a transmission format that's to take geometry and textures, compress it really small, and then throw it down the pipe for rendering. And so your cities, trees, and everything else for the visualization side are finding this kind of path. And then, of course, all of this can kind of be thrown in to a bigger umbrella of city GML data, right? So that's what's kind of fun, is that you can leverage all of these different standards all the way through to kind of get these experiences already in for quite some time. So I would definitely say it's a call to action, right? I like presenting, but more importantly, I like to inspire and collaborate. And so with that, I ask that you please get your innovation on. Participate in game jams, hackathons, events, industries outside of your own, right? You're again, the real world is kind of important to most industries that exist, and so find ways of stepping outside of what is norm and go out and engage. How many of you participate in building industry events regularly? Okay, that should have been every hand that went up, right? The building industry does not build stuff in space, yet, but even then they would still need some kind of coordinate space to understand the data that's there. There has to be more of this interaction, right? Buildings don't float; they deal with the ground and a lot. So that's where I hope in the future every hand goes up, and to kind of help accelerate that merger of how do you bring together these sectors. 10 years ago this year, I started an event called the Architecture, Engineering, Construction Hackathon. And the goal here was not just for the AEC, but we actually had people from geospatial all the way through facilities management, right? But builtinhackathon.com was too long of a URL, so we just kind of squished it down. But after 10 years, we've been in 50 cities, or 50 events, 25 cities, a variety of countries, continents. We've actually had a virtual world during the COVID times and online as well. I am very humbled and honored to say that this is the largest community globally of people that are hacking for innovation in the built environment. That is due to great local leaders like Temu or others that bring it to a local area. And it's become a community of thousands that have put hundreds of projects on open source GitHub and things like that. So that's also what's neat, is to see people who not only collaborate, they collaborate with competitors to help improve the industry, but then they share that knowledge back, right? If I make a better hammer, I want everyone to have a better experience with better tools. And so to further push people to participate, we have an AEC hackathon here that will be buckets of fun. And for those that show up, you'll get that pun if you do decide to come, because I heard that there is something about fins and a love for buckets of fun. So, which will be neat. And so if you want to participate, it will be here in Helsinki, April 14th through 16th. And I did create an actual discount code, right? So if I cannot bribe you by coming, so you get a discount on your ticket to please innovate, I don't know what else to do. I did also bring chocolates from San Francisco. So, but this is the opportunity for a person who has an idea. You don't need to be a coder, right? We have people who identify as, I think I can find the power button on all my devices, that come and participate. But because the goal is to solve a Monday through Friday problem that you can implement on Monday. Or if you're looking at, hey, how can we cross that chasm between the building industry and geospatial? How can we just start the conversation? This is the great place to kind of do that, right? Because with the most love and respect, this country is too small to have that division. I mean, the industry shouldn't be that divided anyways. But I think that, there's very highly educated people here, and I hope that it will happen here. And then I can take that to my home country, where it will, in a few decades, maybe happen as well. So, so do try to participate in the hackathon. This is the code. Another event that's coming up that I'm very excited about, one of my fellow 90-Day Fins is organizing, is this thing called Convergent Reality.io. And so this is a conference that's going to go on in a few months, where it's kind of looking to hit a different kind of audience, right? This is for artisans, artists, educators. Dominique himself is not only a serial entrepreneur with very successful businesses, but he's also a professional opera singer. And so his whole idea is how do we take the real world and all the information about the real world and mix that in fun, creative ways with the artistic community, right? And so if you're interested, there's a variety of different I think universities here in Finland and also in Japan and some other places that are going to be participating in this. So for those of you that obviously are passionate about geospatial, but then also have a little bit of an art bug in you, I ask that you please also look to participate in that. So just a few more slides. And so as I've kind of mentioned, I am super excited for Finland and the EU and this digital immigration. So much so that I have moved here. I have started meetup groups here. And so if a commitment of seeing how we can take the real world and the digital together. This is my commitment to you, right? Is to say that I have changed the course of my life to work with smart people, to collaborate on something fun, to truly set this precedent that I know that you will continue to keep doing. And so in conclusion, take risks and the time to experiment with the tech, right? Leverage the intimacy of these local communities that exist and learn with those communities, right? There's so many great hubs here and startups and things like that, to where if you're interested in things, everyone's 1 degree of separation, if that, right? So please do take advantage of the opportunity that you have here that unfortunately aren't in other places. Allow those in your organization to experiment, make mistakes, fail, yet keep going. This is hard, right? I know for organizations, I know sometimes this is hard for specific cultures, but this is what makes Silicon Valley so appealing, I think. When people say, hey, what is it about that place? It's not ping pong tables. It's not, kombucha on draft. It's the ability to screw up, to improve, and then keep going and have people reward that, because that is how we do growth. Growth is uncomfortable. Growth is stress, but it's necessary. And then share your best practices, right? The industry is big enough globally. And of course, maybe not yourselves, but people like myself definitely want to brag for Finland. So as you do it, I will be happy to brag for you globally. And then just be open to collaborate, right? Too many people I talk to say that they're in silos and they exist in silos. So please, please be that wrecking ball to the silo. And because it's not just for us anymore, right? We really have to think of this next generation of professionals that are coming in. It's a whole new world of collaboration, right? And so please just do your best to reach across. And so with that, with this meeting, and of course your work in general, please keep contributing your passion, your excitement for the development of our mixed reality future for people like myself. And with that, kiitos, and have a great meeting.
Okay. Check. Am I on? Yes, I guess I'm on. Thank you, Damon. Really inspiring
Hopefully.
talk. I have a couple of questions, but let's see a lot of arms here. Any comments, questions? Here. Okay.
So I'm Hanna Havumäki from the Ministry of Defense of Finland. So first of all, thank you for your nice presentation.
Thank you, man.
But I would also like to know your opinion about this open data information sharing. It's, of course, I understand it serves a person who uses data, needs data, but it can sometimes also create a risk for national security, for personal security. So I would like to hear your views on this topic. Thank you.
Yeah, super. Absolutely. Something that I didn't go into much is that I am a big advocate of privacy and digital rights. I think one issue that we're seeing is, as you have devices like this that people put on, this is mapping the inside of that structure, right? And I feel that there's not enough engagement between people that care about permissions and access to certain data and the people that are building the experiences, because most people don't know that, right? So to that point, gentleman, Congressman Himes, that I was fortunate to meet, we shared that, if someone brought one of these devices, right, or even just the phone now, and your kid is playing Pokemon Go in that government facility, well, they're mapping and they're capturing a lot of information. And so that's where also I think the conversation has to be around, where is the permissions in those platforms? And that's something that I feel, because most of the time people that are building interactive 3D experiences, folks gravitate and go grab gamers. Gamers don't have that same sense of responsibility of data as do people who build enterprise solutions. So that is the most important example of why you need to have permissions and control over the data that you put in these environments, because you do need to somehow access or restrict the access that people are allowed. Now, unfortunately, it is becoming a kind of a Pandora's box, because as you have the glasses that you're going to see coming out in the next few years that have cameras on them and things like that, it's a lot harder to opt out of that data collection. And so I think that the conversation really should be around people that are coming from defense ministries, Homeland Security, these types of things, to start to look at and get involved with more of the people that are developing the hardware, to put some kind of restrictions on, okay, it's a geofence. So if I'm walking over by where that lovely construction that's going on over at the ministry building is, maybe there's a dead zone where I can't have certain kind of data, right? But there needs to be a whole lot more conversation, hence why the geospatial community needs to get more involved with those of us that are developing these, because we don't know what we don't know, but we need to know that, because then that does create major security issues. And I can show you tons of examples of where just with 3D building data, there have been massive, issues with people sharing too much, because they're like, hey, because we can do a full detailed 3D model, look at what we did. And there's this one case in the UK where, because of a picture that they put up of the train station, I won't say the train station, but they were doing some renovations, and they showed so much sensitive information in this cross section of the construction that the adjacent building had to spend £1 million sterling to dig up the cable and move it, because there was a financial institution in there. So this goes back to have good communication with your developers for these types of experiences. And then also those permissions of exterior facade, sure, you can see it, but the moment you go in, now you have to at least ping the owner to get those permissions. Yeah. And real quick, just because you asked a question, you have your selection of chocolate. I told you I'm going to bribe you. Of course. Yeah.
All right.
More hands, right? More hands.
Who's next? So quiet. Well,
Ghirardelli chocolate. It's from San Francisco. So
why don't I do one thing here, because the people online maybe don't see these, so I raised them a little. So this is what Damon has been pointing out. Latest style of glasses, a little bit clumsy to my mind, but anyway. So if there is no hands there, first of all, Spatial Web. That's the title you had, and I have here in the audience, Emmy. Did you notice anything? Because Emmy, she's the CEO of Arilund today, and she was my employee number 1 in the company 23 years ago, and we made a product called Spatial Web.
Okay.
Were we a little ahead of time? Maybe. Something came out of it, and
it's awesome.
Still running, actually, the basic idea. But I like that you had it there. But Metaverse is not here. That's what you said.
It not for quite some time. And I think that's more of a business model problem than it is a technical problem.
So we still have time to find our place in the new future of Metaverse. If we think about the geospatial people here.
I think you're the foundation.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, let's go into the data. We discussed about the open data issue, which is obvious today. We realized that we have more or less given out too much data already. But what is actually the geospatial data that is the foundation of Metaverse? What is your vision of that? Is it I will cut you a little. Is it the official government data that we keep collecting in our governmental organizations, or is it the crowdsourced data, or is there some businesses that we come out with the geospatial data that will actually be the foundation of Metaverse? What do you think?
Well, I think it's all right. I mean, the goal is to create a digital shadow.
You can select only one.
Well, it depends on the use case. I mean, that's a tricky question, right? Because it depends on the stakeholder, right? If you're a government, of course you need as much data to make the best decisions. If you're doing something that's experiential, well, then maybe crowdsourced opinions. So unfortunately, I'm going to give you an answer you may not like, but it really is everything, because it depends on the stakeholder, right? Different stakeholders have different needs for the different data. And I saw that through, like, so for example, years ago, we're helping build interactive 3D applications that were doing wind farms. Okay. And so these people wanted to not only visually see how these wind farms are going to look out in the water, but then we also had to feed in data of as far as like, bird migration and like everything else that you could possibly think of. Right. And so the real world, I mean, that's the answer. Reality, and all of the data about reality is the foundation for augmented reality. It's in the name. And then virtual reality still takes place in the real world. So I would just say that it really is all the data, and then just depending upon the stakeholder, the permissions and access to that data. So everything, y'all going to be busy.
Oh, that's easy then. We just take everything. If you think of that, Google Maps came to this game when 10 years ago or so, a little more maybe.
More, yeah.
And so where did they take the data? Because they made the in a way their first metaverse, 2D mostly and so on, but they did collect the data, used government data, bought some open sourced, and really took it all, right?
Right.
And now it's the best data set available worldwide.
Well, I mean, I'd leave you as the expert to say that. I, being a fan of open, kind of prefer like OSM data more, right? Because I think that's or OpenStreetMap or those kind of open data initiatives, because you have people that are passionate going out with a Garmin, mapping areas that aren't cost effective or make any sense for Google. So I think that you're actually going to get better data from people who are passionate geospatial, either professionals or just nerds that are actually collecting the best. So in that, I think it's crowdsourced data is probably going to be a lot better, because for Google or any of these others, there's only wherever there's economic incentive to have really good data, as opposed to everywhere.
And I said the best, it's the most obvious data set today. More. Any more questions in the audience? Okay. Let me give you the mic. So the people online here, maybe there's a question online.
Hi, this is Mika. Hi, Damon.
Hi.
I had only more like a comment on that. I think there's going to be on the data also always different layers of privacy. The government definitely knows way more of us than we know that they know, in the sense that there's even you could pinpoint a person's tax income to a position where he works and where he lives mostly. And some other company might have a credit card information and able to track where you actually spend your money.
Mm-hmm.
But that also has certain layers of privacy. So in the same way that you have the Ministry of Defense has publicly sensitive areas that are not in the public maps, there's definitely going to be that kind of layers on the information as well. And I think there would be never a case that government would publish all the data to any business. So in that sense, even Google knows that where we go, where our phones are, they don't actually know all our details, our education and that kind of stuff, unless it's on a platform they already own.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a very mixed reality, and everything is geospatial.
Yeah, but and again though, but why for me, I'm excited to learn the proper way of doing applications here, because GDPR and all of these other things. What I respect about this area is that you put the user first, right? Everything here is a very human-centric approach, in my opinion. Whereas in the States, it's driven by capital. So I will invade your privacy all day long, listen to everything that you say, because I'm collecting data on you to make a profit. And my government's cool with that. Especially certain, administrations were cool with some of the invasions of privacy, based off of the data that then they could get back and ask for, right? And so to your point, as far as layers of privacy, that's another thing that I want to learn from here and figure out how we can export those best practices for mixed reality. Because it's not just about this device that's listening to me. It's about any other device. If anyone in here has Facebook, Alexa, or any of these on your phone, now I can totally throw my phone away, but I'm still at the vulnerability of this. And then the way that these devices now, as I said earlier, are not only tracking the outside, but then they're looking at, I don't even need to thumbs up anymore, right? A lot of these have eye tracking for foveated rendering. So it only renders what I'm looking at. But what also then you're able to do is to see my pupil dilation. How excited am I about something? And so the amount of data that's being collected. And so that's why I think for mixed reality, that this is, in addition to the geospatial industry, but the concerns that you have around privacy and these data layers of privacy, this is kind of the best place I feel to really shine as an example of doing it right.
Well, thank you for the polite words. One last question. Here, Emmy.
Hi, I'm Emmy from Arilin, a Finnish XR tech company.
Okay.
This is not really so much of a question, more like observation of, I always like to think that what is the value, why we are doing something. And I think that in this metaverse, Web3, whatever it will be, and also mixing the location information with that, I think that what is kind of like the why we should do that, why people should convert using that. The one key thing is that what social media did to us was kind of like it scattered our ability to and capability to focus. And this is something that metaverse is actually bringing back, because kind of like when we are in a virtual environment, even if we are just on our mobile phone, it's quite incredible how well we focus on just the task that we have there. The idea that we are moving around in a spatial kind of like website and focusing on those little tasks that we are supposed to do, tapping on something, finding things there. It's really incredible, the statistics that we get, the metrics, how well we focus on that environment. And I think that is a really big value for any business, that your users actually are focusing on what they are doing to your brand, to your content. And like Juha said, I was in the location-based industry for over 10 years before, and then I have been almost for 10 years in the XR industry, pretty much kind of like ignoring the location-based thing. But now it all turns back, because of course we had been using like coordinates to locate you, but kind of like in a bigger way, it's all getting back to one. And that's why I'm really interested hearing your lecture here. So thank you very much.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I look forward to learning more, because I think that's the exciting thing about this, is that if the snow crash definition of the metaverse happens, I feel like I and a lot of other people who I stand on their shoulders, we failed, because these technologies are about, if anything, they're a communication tool. That's why I tell most people, don't build a VR or AR app for enterprise, have those be features, right? Because you need to communicate at those different levels. And then most importantly, I want to know, how can they help us with our sense of presence and being here, right? Because that's the other part of it, is how do we let people be just present. So yeah, I'd love to connect and get some of your insights. And you definitely get some chocolate. I'll be there in a moment. All right.
All right. Time starts to be up. So thank you very much, Damon, for your presentation. You gave us a lot of things to think about, and you gave us a future. We will be part of Metaverse for sure. And now it's up to us to find our place there. Yeah. Thank you. And one more applause.